There is a woman in the British royal family who has never once asked for a spotlight. She has never chased headlines. She has never given a dramatic interview or complained about palace life. She has never staged a public breakdown or written a memoir filled with accusations. She simply shows up, every single day. Rain, heat, illness, personal grief, none of it has ever stopped her from showing up. For decades, the British public watched her work quietly in the background while louder, more glamorous members of the royal family filled the tabloid pages. They called her old-fashioned. They called her boring. Some said she was out of touch. But while they were busy saying all of that, Princess Anne was doing something that nobody else in that palace could match. She was working harder than any of them, and she has been doing it for over 50 years without complaint, without fanfare, and without ever asking for a single thing in return. And then, in a move that genuinely left Britain stunned, her brother King Charles did something for her that nobody had seen coming. He handed her a level of palace authority that made the entire country stop and take notice. To understand why that moment hit Britain so hard, you first need to understand the woman behind it. Because Princess Anne's story is not the kind of story that gets told often enough, and it deserves to be told properly. Anne Elizabeth Alice Louise was born on August 15, 1950, the second child of Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip. She was not the heir. She was not the spare in the traditional sense either. From the very beginning, she occupied that complicated middle space, a royal daughter in a world that was built around royal sons, in a family where the rules of succession and duty applied differently based on birth order and gender. But from the time she was a young woman, Anne made it clear that she had no interest in playing a decorative role. She had inherited her father's no-nonsense personality in full measure, and she wore it without apology. She first showed the world what she was made of, not in a palace ballroom, but on horseback. Princess Anne competed in equestrian events and built a reputation as a serious athlete, becoming the first British royal to compete in the Olympic Games. She represented Great Britain at the 1976 Montreal Olympics in the equestrian three-day event, and she did it purely on merit. There were no royal exemptions, no special treatment. She trained like every other athlete on that team and earned her place in the lineup. The world press at the time barely knew how to process it. A princess, on an Olympic horse, competing against the world. It was the first real signal that Anne was not going to be the kind of royal the public was used to seeing. Marie Claire. Her dedication to public service stretches back more than 5 decades, beginning with her first official duty in 1969 when she met Welsh soldiers at just 18 years of age. That was the start of a career in royal service that would outlast almost every trend, every scandal, and every shift in how Britain thought about its monarchy. While other royals rose and fell from public favor, Anne just kept working. Her causes were serious, and her commitment to them was total. She became the president of Save the Children UK, traveling to some of the poorest and most dangerous parts of the world to draw attention to the condition of children living in crisis zones. She visited places that no television crew wanted to follow, sat with families in refugee camps, and advocated loudly in rooms where power actually lived. She did not do it for press coverage. In fact, she actively discouraged media attention during many of these trips, believing that the work mattered more than the photograph. AOL. But it was her day-to-day royal schedule that would eventually become the stuff of legend. Year after year, the court circular, the official record of royal engagements, told the same story in numbers. Anne at the top. Anne working more than anyone else in the family. Princess Anne secured the hardest-working royal title in both 2023 and 2024, recording 433 and 457 engagements respectively during those years. For 4 consecutive years, she topped the rankings. Not once, not twice, 4 times running. And she was not doing easy, comfortable engagements either. She was flying across the country, attending ceremonies, hosting official functions, representing the crown at home and abroad, often completing multiple engagements in a single day while other younger members of the royal family managed a fraction of her schedule. AOL. Anne carried out 172 engagements between January and April 2024 alone, working for 68 days, double the number of other working royals during the same period. Think about that for a moment. Double. When the rest of the family was managing their own workloads, Anne was quietly doing twice what they were doing. And she was doing it without a large staff of communications professionals crafting her public image, without a social media team shaping her narrative, without a carefully managed press strategy designed to make her look good. She just worked, and the numbers spoke for themselves. GB News. Then came 2024, which by any measure was one of the most turbulent years the British royal family had faced in recent memory. Early in the year, King Charles received news that sent shockwaves through the palace and through the nation. The year 2024 proved to be particularly challenging for the royal family, marked by significant health issues affecting two senior members. His Majesty the King and the Princess of Wales both underwent treatment for cancer. The diagnosis came quickly after Charles had gone in for what was announced as a procedure related to a benign enlarged prostate. What came back from the tests was not what anyone had expected: cancer. The word landed like a stone in still water, and the ripples moved fast. The Crown Chronicles. The palace handled the announcement carefully. The king reduced his public-facing appearances but maintained his constitutional responsibilities, including receiving his daily red box of government papers. He was not stepping away from his duty entirely. He was far too committed to the crown for that, but the physical demands of a full public schedule were not possible during treatment, and adjustments had to be made. At almost exactly the same time, the Princess of Wales revealed that she too was undergoing cancer treatment, having discovered the illness following a planned abdominal surgery in January. Two of the most prominent members of the working royal family were suddenly sidelined at the same time. The pressure on the remaining working royals to hold the institution together intensified overnight. The Crown Chronicles. This shift underscored the importance of collaborative effort within the monarchy, as various royals stepped in to support the king and Catherine during their recovery. But among all of them, one person carried more weight than anyone else. Princess Anne, once again, became the anchor. The Crown Chronicles. The Princess Royal increased her workload as she undertook engagements in place of other senior members of the royal family, picking up the slack as King Charles and the Princess of Wales stepped back from their royal duties due to their cancer diagnoses. She did it without being asked twice. She did it without making a public statement about her sacrifice. She stepped forward, filled the gaps, and kept the machine running. While the press was focused on the heartbreaking health news surrounding Charles and Kate, Anne was quietly holding the public face of the monarchy together through sheer will and routine. GB News. And then, in June of 2024, even that strength was tested. The Princess Royal was sidelined after she suffered a concussion in a horse-related incident in June 2024, and she said she had no memory of the accident that put her in hospital. It was a serious injury, the kind that would have had most people resting for months, the kind that, for a woman in her 70s, carried real risk. She had suffered a blow to the head at her home, Gatcombe Park, and the medical team was careful with her recovery. Britain held its breath. Royal watchers who had come to rely on Anne's steady presence felt, for the first time, the scale of what she actually meant to the institution. The bullet. 3 weeks after Anne was hospitalized, she returned to work. 3 weeks. She came back faster than almost anyone had expected, and she came back at full pace. Not at a reduced schedule, not with a carefully managed reintroduction to public life. She came back and picked up where she had left off. Despite sustaining a significant head injury over the summer, Princess Anne completed a remarkable 217 royal engagements in 2024, the most of any working royal, making her the hardest-working royal family member for the 4th straight year. The numbers were almost impossible to believe given what she had been through, and they said everything about who this woman was. The bullet Marie Claire. Meanwhile, King Charles was watching all of this. He had seen his sister work through his cancer diagnosis, seen her absorb extra duties without complaint, seen her come back from a head injury and immediately return to the grind. And he had been thinking, clearly, carefully, about what the monarchy needed, and who deserved a formal acknowledgement of the role they were already playing. The move Charles made did not come as a single dramatic announcement. It had roots that went back to late 2022, when Charles had barely settled into his role as king and was already thinking about the structural health of the institution. In November 2022, King Charles proposed that his siblings, Princess Anne and Prince Edward, be named additional counselors of state, and his requested change was read to the House of Lords. The counselors of state are not a ceremonial honor. They are a legal designation that carries real constitutional weight. The Regency Act allows the monarch to delegate certain royal functions to counselors of state if he is absent from the United Kingdom or unwell, with duties that can include holding Privy Council meetings or granting royal assent to legislation. These are functions at the very heart of how the British state operates. The ability to grant royal assent to laws. The ability to hold Privy Council meetings in the king's absence. These are not symbolic gestures, they are the actual machinery of constitutional government. AOL House of Commons Library. The king's formal request specified Princess Anne and Prince Edward as extra substitutes, with a statement explaining that adding them would ensure continued efficiency of public business when the king was unavailable. The Parliament moved on it quickly. A month after the proposal, the two officially became councillors of state, and the Regency Act was amended. B.B. Cyril. But why did this land the way it did? Why did this feel to Britain like something more than a bureaucratic update to an old piece of legislation? Because of what it replaced. Charles made the move to include his younger sister and brother because both Harry and Andrew had left their roles as senior royals. The previous list of councillors had included Prince Harry and Prince Andrew, two royals who were no longer available or appropriate to hold that position. Harry had moved to California with Meghan and stepped back from royal duties entirely. Andrew had been stripped of his military titles and public roles in the wake of his association with Jeffrey Epstein and the subsequent legal proceedings against him. The optics of either man stepping in to represent the king at a constitutional level were unthinkable. The change quietly prevented Prince Harry, Prince Andrew, and Princess Beatrice from being called upon to act as substitutes for the king. CBS News GB News. As Charles' former butler Grant Harold explained, Anne has obviously been a counselor of state, which is who stands in for the king if he's overseas or unwell. It's quite an important role, and he's made it possible for Anne to stand in. That clarity from someone who had worked inside the palace was telling. This was not a symbolic promotion. This was a practical, meaningful transfer of authority, a formal recognition that when Charles could not be there, Anne was the person he trusted to hold things together. The royal observer. And she did exactly that. Princess Anne led an investiture ceremony at Buckingham Palace while King Charles was recovering, one of the most solemn and formal events in the royal calendar, where the monarch or their representative personally bestows honors upon individuals who have been recognized for their service to the nation. For Anne to lead that ceremony was a public confirmation of her standing. She was not merely helping out. She was standing in the place of the king. AOL. Anne was also allowed to wear her full uniform as Gold Stick in Waiting, escorting the King and Queen Camilla on horseback as their carriage rode from Buckingham Palace to the Palace of Westminster, and she stood near her monarch during the reading of the King's speech, the first time she attended an opening of Parliament since 1985. The symbolism of that moment was impossible to miss. The last time Anne had stood in that position, it was beside her mother. Now she was beside her brother, in a role that confirmed her as one of the most essential figures in the functioning of the modern monarchy. The Royal Observer. The royal family's collective output rose by 23% in 2025 compared to the previous year, with the king conducting 533 engagements, the most he had done since 2019, and Princess Anne close behind with 478. The institution that had looked fragile during the health crises of 2024 came back stronger, and at the center of that recovery, doing what she had always done, was Anne. AOL. What Britain was really reacting to when Charles made his move was not just the legal mechanics of the Councillors of State Act. It was the recognition that a woman who had spent her entire adult life in service, quietly, consistently, without drama, without complaint, was finally being given the formal authority that matched the weight she had always carried. Anne had been holding the monarchy together in practice for years. Charles was simply making it official. When asked about retirement during her visit to South Africa in early 2025, Anne said plainly, "I don't think there's a retirement program on this particular life. It really isn't written in, no, it isn't really an option." There was no performance in those words, no carefully crafted sentiment for public consumption. It was the straightforward truth of a woman who had simply never considered stopping. Yahoo! That is the woman King Charles chose to place at the center of palace authority during the most difficult period the modern monarchy had faced. Not the most famous royal, not the most glamorous one, the one who showed up, the one who had always shown up. Britain had spent decades looking past Princess Anne toward the louder, more dramatic stories the royal family kept producing. And then one day, they looked up and realized that while they had been looking elsewhere, she had been the one holding everything together all along. That was the moment Britain went speechless, not because the move was shocking in the way that scandals are shocking, but because it was so obviously, undeniably right, and the country had simply not been paying close enough attention to see it coming.